Hello, welcome back to another tutorial. This is your instructor Avkash, and in this tutorial we are going to use CoreUI React template as a front end, and for the back end we are going to use Python, Flask, and Pandas for this project. Our objective is to use the CoreUI React template as a front end and using Pandas in the back end to read a CSV file from web and collect its data, convert to a Pandas data frame, and then render that data frame into the UI as a JSON object. So that's our target for this project. We already have a starter code which you can get from here. This starter code give you two different folders, one for your CoreUI project and second for your Python backend project. So we are going to use CoreUI React Python Flask Starter as our base code, and we are going to add the Pandas specific code in this project. So this is our project. What I have done is that I have already copied this project and added as a Pandas starter. So we can look into CoreUI Python Flask Pandas starter, and you will see there is a Python code and there is a CoreUI code. So let's open the Python code first. So here is our open, and we are going to use the Pandas, and here is a Python Flask starter. So we have used that, and you could see here there's this project I opened previously. It only had a Python environment, which you could see here, Python 3. I'm using Condas Python 3, and I'm just using the exact this API.py, which is this one. Okay, so that's our runtime. Okay, and then if I try to launch this project, you would see that's running, and it's running our app.py, and it's running on 3003. Okay, so that's our test works fine. Now we will look into our core UI. So I will be using the open folder, and here just to make sure 300 second, and this is a Python Pandas starter, and it's a CoreUI React starter. That will be our project. Here we have CoreUI React starter. Okay, that's our project. And what we will do is that here we can look into CoreUI. So the CoreUI is already npm installed, so node modules are there. So npm run start, it's going to launch, and then because we already have our Python server started, here this Python server will use as a backend here, and CoreUI will be used. CoreUI template is used as a front end here, and we will give few more seconds for it to get ready. So you could see there is only one route, which is starter, and that's we already have here everything we have. So what we will do very quickly is that our objective is to read a CSV file from web using Pandas and convert that to JSON and render that as a JSON to the UI. So for that reason, we will create a new page called data reader, and within the data reader we will do everything. So very first what we will do, we will come here and we will create views pages starter. So within the starter we could add one, or we can, what we could do is that we could add a new folder called data reader. Okay, and within the data reader we actually call it a file called we can call it CSV data reader dot JavaScript. So this is our CSV data reader is our file. Okay, and here's our starter script. I will just copy it, I will paste it, because I just want to make the CSV data reader. Okay, that's our class, and that's default is really returning, so we will use CSV data reader. We will just make a one call here, so we will remove most of these code we are not really needed. Okay, this one, so that's like a one function, we just call it data reader starter, so we can make sure this code is really running here. Okay, and we have get post. Okay, so CSV data reader is our file, and now we will come here in routes, so we will call it CSV data reader, so routes. So we have CSV const. Okay, and that is basically this. and so import and views, and we will call it remember this is data reader, so here it's gonna call the data reader, and from data reader this is CSV data reader.js. so that's our file with okay, that's we could verify it by Mac command and command button, so it really sees now we have data reader. So we can say okay, we just call it CSV data reader is basically that's the component, and we just call it CSV data reader. Okay, so that's gonna look like this way, and here we just call it CSV data. Okay, so remember, if even if you want to call it full use CSV data reader, we need to remember this in routes here. So if we are defining here as data reader, so we call it CSV reader. Here we have to give exact same name what we have, CSV data reader, and here depending on icon you can change it, you know. So here icon is speedometer icon, you can actually call it icon gear. I remember for gears it works for settings. If you see here gear, let me see, maybe it's not enabled, so let's call the user. Oh yeah, there is a one icon. So if you click on here CSV data reader, and it's data reader starter, it's actually reading the data reader starter. So we have very quickly created a page, or okay, and then we will render our CSV file over here. So okay, and then here we have a v1 hello. Now we will actually call a new API called data reader, or EADER, and we need to implement a data reader. So now you will see the data reader is not implemented, so we need to add the data reader here. For that reason we will go to core and we will just call it a file called CSV data handler.py. okay, and remember this is our API handler where we are handling, so technically we can build a function within this. So what we will do is that we will take this, so we will use, so we need parse here, and this will be our API. We just really need a get, we will build the get here, so very quickly. So here we have get, and we can say this is the data handler function. Data handler function is there, and this data handler we just call it data handler. Let's remove this so we don't really, okay, data handler, and this CSV data handler we can define here. So we can say from core dot, this is CSV data handler, we are saying bring the data handler function, and this data handler will be used here. So we can say okay, let's use the data handler function, and we called it data reader, the way we are expecting here, data reader. So if data reader will be called v1, and it's gonna launch this function, and it's a get call, it's gonna return this, and if everything is right we will reload this page. We will make sure the call is when, so it's a v1 data reader, and okay, and this is a get call, and hello get request detail. Okay, and now we have done this thing, and what we will do is that we will stop this, so we will make sure everything reloads correctly. Everything is reload correctly. Let's reload this, and here you see data starter, and if we go to debugger and we look into the console, here you see that object, and here is a hello from data handler function success. So this proves that our connection from UI to backend is completed. And if we want to see that message here, there is a very simple test. What we could do here is that we can take this message and we can render here. So if we want to render that message, we can actually create okay here, and then we will render that message here. So we call it API message, and we will define it empty message here. So okay, this is our API message, and we can say API message, so we need to say this dot set state, and within the set state we can say we want API message here. Okay, and we want to this dot set stage, we want to say that's API message, and this is the result. So we want to say, okay, what we could do is that we can say JSON dot stringify. So take that whole JSON object, convert it to a string here. Okay, so this is the this dot set state. Okay, so we just have to add this thing in a way how we are doing. So we can look into here. So you could say here that objects are we need to just store this object in our, so this dot set state, and we need to close this thing in a parenthesis. Okay, so here you see, so we have closed this thing. Okay, and here you go. So this is pretty much, so set is API message, and then what we do here, we can say this dot get result object. Okay, so this is API message, sorry, let's say state dot API message. Okay, now we will look into here, call is there. So this call was made, result was collected in a get result object. We have stringify because it was a JSON object, and then we made it a string, and we are rendering a string here. So that pretty much proved that okay, our call was made correctly. Okay, our next step will be to actually make a call backend and create a whole function where we will get data from a web URL and then try to convert it to a Pandas DataFrame, then read the data frame as and rows and columns, and then create a JSON and then render JSON here as a table. So that's our next step. So let's look into our Python code. So here is our Python code, and what we will do is that we will create a function called define, and we will call it CSV reader to JSON. Okay, and this function we will be using here, and this function will actually return result status. Okay, and it will also, so result status will be failure or success. So it will be failure, and it's gonna be result data. Okay, so result data will be some kind of, okay, all right, and then you are going to return result status and result data. Okay, so this will be our function. So we will be calling here, we will say result status result data, and we are going to make this call here. Okay, so this will return the result status here, and it will return the result data here. Okay, so now you will see that this is how we made a function which is going to process our real actual pandas related work. So now we need to import pandas as pandas. Okay, and now we need to choose a URL. So I already have a URL. Let's see what this URL has. So we can go internet and we try to, so here you could see there is a CSV file which has 2 columns just for our simplicity. So we have country and region, and here are the information about country and region. Okay, so we are going to define URL equals, so this is our CSV URL. Okay, we have defined CSV URL is here. Now what we will do, we will try it and everything works except if result status will be if everything goes well, then result status will be success. Okay, and if we want to anything put here in result data, we can actually say result data dot append, because it's gonna fail append, and we can just create an item here. We can say okay, message will be unable to process the request. Okay, so now in both scenario everything is going to now work, and now we need to process the CSV URL. So for that reason, we are going to write the pandas related code. So here we have uses pandas. We are also going to use import requests, because if you do not have them, you really need to make sure that you have ability to you use pip to install these two. Okay, so why request? Because we are going to use request to make this URL call, and then we are going to use pandas to pull the data and save as a data frame. Okay, so for that reason, what I have done, I have already created a function, and so here URL. So I will just walk through piece step by step, because what we are trying to do here. So very first thing what we are doing is that we are taking the URL. So here you can see request.get URL to content. So URL content will be here. Now you see, so the related with the URL content, we have request here. Now what the next step will be, that we are going to use the pandas here. You see, so we need to import IO. So IO operation. Okay, import IO. We are taking URL request, which is actually URL content now. So URL content, and then it will become the CSV data. So that will give us a CSV data here. These two requests will make sure that we have received the CSV data. Next, we can check and add little more to it. Okay, so for that reason, what we have done, we have got the CSV data here. Okay, and I will put a breakpoint here to make sure we have made this call, so everything looks good. So this will be our entry. So let's come back here, make a request. Okay, and this is our code, and you see that breakpoint is not hitting because I haven't made this application run in debug mode. So what I will do is that I will stop it, and I will call it debug equals true. So now its debugger is ready. Our breakpoint should hit, and here we can use 2 spaces. Everything looks good, and let's run it. And if you see here, connected to debugger, it means our debugger related code should work. Now we connect it, and here you see request came. Here you could see that, okay, in this scenario, CSV data object is available here. So you could see this is a pandas object. If you are interested to know what kind of object it is, you can say type of this. It will tell you this is a pandas data frame. So this proves that this is a pandas data frame. So we have downloaded this URL content, and now we have saved them as a pandas data frame, and now we are going to process it. Okay, so we have got this thing, and there you go. And you will see here that message is empty because we haven't did anything to result data here. So what we will do is that we will try to add few more information to here. So we will say row count is this CSV data has object called shape. So here shape here, and then shape has a 2 different values. So we will figure it out, okay, what shape is really returning first. So let's come back here, make a call. Okay, now you see here CSV data. We can see CSV data dot shape, which is a tuple of 2 items. If you want to know what is the very first value, is the number of rows. What is the second value? Sorry, is the number of columns. So we can say rows, the shape of 0 is the rows, and then you can say column count is CSV data dot shape of 1. Okay, and then what we will do is that we will take the result data, and here in the result data dot append, we are actually trying to create the JSON message. So we will say JSON result is rows are your row count, columns are your column count. Okay, and this result is really added here, and then result data is what really being going to send to UI. We will let it go, and we will remove this. See, let me fix it. Okay, so that's column counts, everything is okay. Now let's make a call, and okay, here you could see result success, it means everything looks good here, and number of rows here, number of columns here, and they are in this way. So again, it's a stringify message. Now we need to get the number of what are the columns here. So we can say column name is CSV data dot columns dot to list. And what it means that, let's take the columns, so we can say columns column names, actually column names. So now we have got the column names here. Let's see if it's working. So it's reading the data, loading. Here you could see columns are country and region. So because this is how we got columns. Now our next step is that there are two ways we could get the JSON working in this scenario. One, we can just use a simple function to read the JSON. So for example, there is a very simple APIs available. We can take the data frame and convert to JSON. Okay, and then orientation is set to records. So if we want to use this one, how will we have one good way to take the CSV data dot to JSON, and then you can say orient. So because we have to define this thing, so we can say orient equals, and we can say records. So you can see here, okay, so we have used this thing, and then we can call it row JSON data equals, okay, and then we can call it here columns, okay, row data, we call it row data, and we just call it row data here. And here you could see that, okay, we can put a breakpoint. Let's launch. Here we are here, let's see. So you could see here raw JSON data. What you are seeing here, you see here, let's open this here, raw row JSON data. Here you could see that all the JSON data is available here. Let's see how, and here you could get all the JSON data. So here you could see raw data, which is a JSON data, and everything is available here. So that's a one way to look into. Second option is, I will say I will use it option 1. Okay, and if we want to go with option 2, where we can say, okay, let's use another option where we try to do the manual. Okay, we can say option 2. In option 2, we will use a little different way to get the rows columns here. So that's the and we will use this thing. So this way I wanted to show you that how you could really do this thing. Okay, so here this is our option 2. What we are doing is that we will not using this, we are taking CSV data, iterating all the rows, it will generate the index in rows, and then we are taking the rows and converting them to dictionary, and then we are storing them in this final row data, which is an array, and we are appending that. And that final row data is basically what this data is. So what we are doing is that we are saying this is your final row data. Okay, and thus should generate another list of all the rows in JSON. So here you see that this is a way your data, row data, has all the value correctly, and this is rather than converting to a string and then seeing data, you have seen the difference, that it is much more cleaner way to collect the data and very quickly process it. Okay, so now we have pretty much completed our work at the API side, backend side. Now our job is to make sure that how we can render this data on a UI. So now we will work in UI side of project. In this step, we are going to use the UI code. So this was our UI code. We have already collected the JSON data. So now we are going to render piece by piece, rows, columns, and then row data. These are our items. So what we will do very quickly is that the way we were stringify, we are not going to create this, rather than we are converting that to object and then process it further. So very first thing what we will do is that we will call it CSV data object and making that bit array. And here we are saying that rather than this, just store get result object as it is. So we have got this here, and here rather than rendering this, we are going to say this dot render CSV data results. Okay, and this we need to implement here. So this is what we are going to implement. Okay, so first of all, CSV data, so we will say if this dot state CSV object, okay, this object is okay, we're gonna work on it, and then I will go a little more deeper inside once we have here. Okay, and once we are here, then we can say, okay, let's try to process it. And the way we are going to process it, we are going to one by one. So we need to know what this object is really bringing us here. For that reason, we will open the developer tools, debugger, sources, and just to get a hit here in this function where we are calling, we will type here debugger. Now when this page will load, it will hit the debugger and we arrive here. So we can see how our debugger look like. So here you could see CSV data object really look like that way. Okay, request will go. Here you could see still empty. Okay, and then request looks like went to here. And right now we are here. Now you could see that message is filled with this, and this is one array. Okay, and then we have everything here. So this is how object really look like. Result is success and message is one array which consists of column, rows, column data, and column names, everything like that. So we figure it out. Okay, this is really very good. And just for some easiness, we will remove this debugger code, so we don't really need, and we will let this page load. And now we already have access to our source code, so we can put breakpoint as we need it. So one thing we have seen that our result set is actually the append here, because we are appending. So rather than appending here, what we could do is that in this scenario, that rather than making it array, we can keep it JSON. But the reason why I made this thing as a append here, so we know that this CSV object will have at least one element to it. Okay, so if we have CSV element and, okay, so let me show you what I'm trying to do here. Let's reload the page. Okay, and okay, try, let's see, still okay, the message. So here see we have result status and then we have message, result status, message. So I think message is not a good word here. We need to call it result data. So now we have result status and result data. So that's a better word here. Okay, so we can say if object is okay, then we can say that this dot state dot CSV data object, it has result. Remember, this is what we are, so it has result status. Okay, so we are saying if it has result status, that's very good. And we are also verifying that if this whole object also has result data. Okay, if it has, then we are really very good. We can go inside and we can say var API status is this, correct? And we can say if API status is success, do something, else do something. And here we can say if this is here, we can say return. Okay, and here we can say a div, can say span class name. Okay, and we can say here return what. Remember, API status is this, and then we can say var API data is result data. Okay, remember, so this will have result data, and result data, and if there's a failure, it will have failure as a message here. So we can say, okay, API data. Okay, remember this is an array dot here message if it is a failure. If it is a successful, we can say if API is success and API data dot length is greater than 0 or is equals to 1. Then we can do something here, and we can say, okay, return, let's have something. Okay, and we just call it API data dot rows. Let's see what happens. Okay, here you could see rows. So I'm just printing rows here. It's 194 rows here, and if it's a failure, it's going to return the message here. Okay, so now I can make this little more beautiful, and then the way we can do is that we can say text success. Okay, and we just call it rows here. Okay, here you could see rows are that many, and if you want to change this to little different, you can say, okay, here. Okay, and we just call this thing as a bold, and we just call it text primary. Here you could see 194 rows. Okay, then if we want to get columns, now we say columns, and here we call it cols. Okay, so here you could get columns. Now in order to, we can make next line. Here you could get rows and columns. Okay, now we need to put the column names. So column names, so if in order to understand what the column name is, we have to make sure we are understanding it correctly. Okay, so one option here is that when we try to make a call, okay, let's do not use this, we are here. Okay, API data has row columns, column is an array, and then row data is everything here. So we will look into that, but let's look into the columns. So one option we have is that we can say if API data length is API equals to API 0. In that scenario, we don't really need to define this, very simple. And here we need to provide the column names. So we can say, okay, new line, and we can say column names. And column names here, if you look into this and this will be API data, and here will be what was the object here, columns. So this is the columns, and you will see what's going to happen. Here are the column, but they are rendered as it is. They are not rendered as an item the way we really want 1 and 2. So if we want to make it a little beautify properly, we have option. That one option, we can process this array here, or we can actually create a function to render it. So we will say render column names, and we will say, okay, you will provide the object and we will render it for you. So we are saying, okay, let's call this guy this dot render column names, and here is the list of columns. So what this function will do is that it will take, we call it column list. Okay, and we will take this, we will define as dot map, map. Okay, this is our object, and here we will define the function object. So very first we are going to say items, second is index, and then we are going to say okay, return span key equals index. The value we are trying to say here, value is item, sorry, not item, just item, and this will render these value. Okay, so let's see what happens here. Column names, so we have column list, item, column, item, index. Okay, so we are using column names, list, okay, item, and then index. So item is here. Let me see if what is point right now. Okay, return. Okay, and there you go. So we have got the column names, country and region, and if we try to put them properly, we can also say here index, and that's where you will see that this will render 0 and 1. And if you want to have little more beautification, we can say class name mr1, we can say text default. Okay, and that will, so you could see country. Okay, and then just to make sure, we can say index plus 1. There you go. So you have country and region. So those are the two, country and region is your column names. Next we want to render this whole list of all row data, and for that reason we will use little more extra code. So we have horizontal line, we will call it card, then we will say card header, and we will call it all rows, then we will call the card body, and you see we already have card header, card body imported, so it will work as it is, card body here. And within the card body we are going to make a function call, say this render all rows. So that's one option. Or there is another option is that we can take this card body and we can use an object, and we can use a particular React component to render it. So for that reason there is a component called JSON table. So JSON table, okay, and we can say React. So JSON table React. Okay, so it's a simple React table, and if you see here, you just pass the React table and it just renders you very quickly. It's a very simple component. It's called TS React JSON table. So we will include this in our package.json. It is package.json, so we will call it TS React table. And if you want to see this thing more of as a TS React table, okay, and then you just go to npm registry to get the current version. So it's a 0.1.2. So we can take this 0.1.2. okay, and we already have it. If you want everything up and latest, this, let's come back here, npm update. So that should make us a call. Now we can come back here while it's updated. So we can say import JSON table from, okay, just to make sure this is how, so it's called React and import JSON table. So it's written as JSON table. So we have JSON table. Okay, it's still importing. So this JSON table will be used by us. So if we can look into how JSON table is really being called. So you see here JSON table, you can provide rows and columns. It's a rows, columns, and class. You can provide various properties, and there are several ways we could have really call this. Okay, so now we will call npm run start here in our code. Just to make it faster, we will call here JSON table rows equals, this is our object app data dot row data. Okay, columns are here. We already have data dot columns, so this is our columns, and let's use this JSON table and let's see. So our API is ready, and here you could see, oh, it's already ready now. So here you could see that our table is created, and here everything is here. So now we have actually showed this JSON table. Now if you want to make this scrollable card, what we could do is that we can actually make this area. So we can say style equals, okay, we call it height, and we can say let's use 400. Okay, and just make sure this is 400. Now you will see that 400 is there, but the content is really spilling out. So what we really need to do is that we need to make it scroll enabled. So for here we can add more scroll. So you could see here is scroll. There are various scroll properties available which we could say, and or we can enable scroll. So I already have the code, so we can just use some code which is really here. So here is the style overflow. Okay, so we can say here you could say overflow is auto, and overflow add the scroll bar horizontal. And once we have that code added, now you could see that all the content is available is here. Okay, and it's pretty much all the way really nicely set, that one. So that was that. If we have this data, we can, if you want to add a little more gap here, we can say class name mb1. So okay, there you go. So you have a little more information available. It looks good. So that was our objective. We wanted to read the pandas table in Python, and then convert that to a JSON and then send to UI so we could really show it. So that's all I had to show for you guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in my another tutorial. Thank you. Bye.